This story is titled, My Girlfriend Kept Postponing Our Engagement Multiple Times, saying she needed a break before marriage. So I gave her space. But when I went to get the ring back, I caught her with her ex, then I canceled everything and vanished. Hey Reddit, my name is Marcus, and I'm 29 years old. For 7 years, I was with a woman named Luna who seemed to love everything about getting engaged except actually getting married. She called off our wedding twice with completely ridiculous excuses. But before she could cancel it a third time, I already had my exit strategy planned. I walked away from the whole mess and watched her life completely implode from the comfort of Costa Rica. Here's exactly how it all went down. I first met Luna during the 2017 Super Bowl party at my buddy Tyler's place. She showed up as the +1 of Tyler's girlfriend, wearing a Miami Dolphins jersey despite clearly not knowing a single player's name. I was apparently the only guy at the party brave enough to call her out on this obvious fashion choice. So who's your favorite Dolphins player? I asked her, leaning casually against the kitchen counter while she grabbed a beer from the cooler. All of them, she replied without missing a beat. You don't know a single player's name, do you? I pressed, though I was smiling when I said it. Does it matter? She shot back with a grin. The jersey looks cute on me. She wasn't wrong about that part, I'll give her credit. Somehow, that entire exchange ended with her number in my phone, and we had our first date that same weekend. Luna was the classic hot yoga instructor, all Zen vibes, Instagram-worthy flexibility, and that effortless way of making every conversation sound like it came from a wellness blog. Meanwhile, I was pulling 60-hour weeks as a digital marketing specialist for a mid-sized e-commerce company. She loved that I had what she called a real career and actual ambition, and I loved that she was attractive, impressively flexible, and made all my friends openly jealous. Let's be completely honest here. At 24 years old, I wasn't exactly searching for deep compatibility metrics or long-term partnership qualities. My dating app criteria basically boiled down to attractive and doesn't seem completely psychotic. Luna cleared that admittedly very low bar with room to spare. We dated for about a year before moving in together. During that time, I saved up enough money to buy her a 1.5 carat diamond ring, 3 months of my salary that I'd managed to put away by eating ramen noodles for lunch every single day. I proposed at Antonio's, this upscale Italian restaurant downtown where a single plate of pasta costs more than my first car payment ever was. She cried, said yes immediately, and posted the ring photo on Instagram before we'd even left the restaurant. Looking back now with perfect hindsight, Luna had red flags that I willfully chose to ignore because I was thinking with the wrong head. Her longest job had lasted exactly 14 months. Her credit score was absolutely abysmal, the kind of number that makes loan officers physically wince. She was 28 years old, and her parents were still paying her cell phone bill, her car insurance, and slipping her cash every single time she visited them for Sunday dinner. Meanwhile, I was already maxing out my 401k contributions, had put a down payment on a small investment property that I was renting out for passive income, and by age 25, I had a decent salary, a solid stock portfolio, and a side consulting gig that brought in another $20,000 annually. The sex was undeniably great. She looked absolutely stunning on my arm at company events, and I'd somehow convinced myself that her free spirit balanced out my more structured approach to life. Classic mistake that suckers make every single day. The first wedding was scheduled for July 2020 at this beautiful vineyard about an hour outside the city. I had already dropped $15,000 in non-refundable deposits for the venue, photographer, and catering. 3 months before our wedding date, Luna came home from brunch with her sister Sophia while I was relaxing on the couch watching the NBA playoffs. Marcus, I've been thinking about the wedding timeline, she said, sitting down next to me with that tone that immediately put me on edge. Work is absolutely insane right now with this new hot yoga Pilates fusion certification I'm working on, and I'm just not sure July is realistic anymore. I grabbed the remote and muted the game, turning to face her completely. What exactly does that mean? I think we should postpone everything until fall when things calm down a bit, she said, not quite meeting my eyes. You know how important this certification is for my career. Let me put this in perspective for you. Luna's insane work schedule consisted of teaching exactly 4 yoga classes per week at $25 per class. Meanwhile, I was pulling in 6 figures annually, but still driving my 10-year-old Honda Civic to save money for our future together. But like the complete idiot I was at the time, I nodded and said we could postpone the wedding. That night, after Luna had gone to bed, I sat at my kitchen table with a calculator and figured out exactly how much money I had just lit on fire. $23,000 in venue deposits, photography deposits, catering minimums, and those fancy save-the-date cards we'd already mailed out. When I mentioned this staggering figure to Luna the next morning, she just shrugged it off like it was pocket change. "It's just money, babe," she said casually while scrolling through Instagram. "We'll make more." Easy words to say when you're not the one actually making the money in the first place. What Luna conveniently didn't mention during her dramatic announcement was that this Yoga Pilates fusion certification she was supposedly so stressed about required exactly 2 weekends of actual class time. Hardly what anyone would call an overwhelming schedule that necessitated canceling a wedding. What she also failed to mention was that her sister Sophia had just booked a 3-week vacation to Thailand that directly overlapped with our wedding date. And Luna apparently couldn't bear the thought of getting married without her precious sister there. I only found out about this real reason weeks later through Tyler's girlfriend, who had overheard Luna and Sophia planning the entire Thailand trip during that infamous brunch where Luna decided to torpedo our wedding. The second wedding attempt was planned for June 2021. We had learned our lesson about expensive venues, so we downsized to a hotel ballroom package that was less extravagant but still required a $12,000 deposit. 4 months before this second wedding date, Luna's sister Sophia broke up with her boyfriend of 8 months, and suddenly Luna couldn't possibly get married while Sophia was going through such devastating emotional trauma. Luna dropped this particular bomb on me while I was out in the garage, methodically cleaning my golf clubs after a frustrating round at the local course. She just walked in, leaned against my workbench, and let out this dramatic sigh that immediately told me something was coming. "Sophia and Derek broke up," she announced like she was delivering news of a national tragedy. "She's completely devastated by the whole thing." I kept cleaning my 7-iron, not looking up. "That sucks. I never really liked that guy anyway. Marcus, I don't think I can get married while Sophia is this heartbroken," Luna continued, her voice taking on that manipulative tone I was beginning to recognize. "She's supposed to be my maid of honor. It just wouldn't feel right to have this huge celebration when she's going through such a difficult time." I finally put down the golf club and looked directly at her. "Are you seriously telling me we're canceling our wedding again because your sister's dating life is a complete train wreck?" "It's not about that," Luna said, immediately getting defensive. "It's about supporting family during a crisis. You should understand that." The next day, I decided to call Sophia directly, supposedly to express my condolences about her breakup. She sounded completely fine when she answered the phone, not at all like someone who was supposedly devastated and emotionally destroyed. "Yeah, it's kind of a bummer, but honestly, Derek and I weren't really working out anyway," Sophia told me matter-of-factly. "I actually told Luna not to change your wedding plans over this. That's completely ridiculous. I'm already dating someone new, actually." That night, I confronted Luna with what her sister had actually said. "Sophia told me she's totally fine with us keeping the wedding date," I said. "She actually said she's already dating someone else and thinks it's ridiculous to cancel our wedding." Luna's eyes narrowed dangerously, and I could see her brain working to come up with a response. "Well, I know my sister better than you do," she said coldly. "She's devastated inside. She's just putting on a brave face for everyone else. Why did you call her anyway? Don't you trust me?" I should have pressed the issue, but instead I just dropped it and went along with canceling everything again. My friends had already booked flights and hotel rooms for a Vegas bachelor party. Another expensive mess that I had to clean up. After the second cancellation, my best friend Ryan pulled me aside during our regular Thursday night poker game. We were out on his deck, cigars in hand, while the other guys were inside arguing about the blinds and getting increasingly loud about their terrible hands. "Dude, you realize she's never going to marry you, right?" Ryan said, taking a long drag from his cigar. "This is a pattern. She's playing games with you." I brushed off his comment at the time, but his words stuck with me for weeks afterward. Here's the thing about being a man who's engaged to an Instagram-obsessed yoga instructor. Society expects you to shut up and be grateful for what you've got. After all, you landed a hot woman who can put her ankles behind her head. So what right do you have to complain about anything? Every single time I tried to express my frustration to my married colleagues at work, they would just roll their eyes and give me the same tired responses. "Marriage is expensive, man. Get used to it," they'd say, with these dead looks behind their eyes. "Happy wife, happy life," they'd repeat like some kind of defeated mantra. But they didn't get it at all. This wasn't about the money, though the financial losses were certainly adding up. This was about respect, about being treated like an equal partner in the relationship, instead of just an ATM with benefits attached. I started noticing this underlying pattern in Luna's behavior that became impossible to ignore once I recognized it. Luna would set these arbitrary relationship milestones, moving in together, getting engaged, planning elaborate weddings. But whenever we actually approached completing one of these milestones, she would manufacture some kind of crisis or emergency that required postponing everything. She wanted all the social status and Instagram opportunities that came with each milestone. But she didn't want the actual commitment that came with following through. The engagement ring was a perfect example of this pattern. When we were out with her friends or at yoga studio events, that ring was front and center, prominently displayed in every single photo she took. She would angle her hand just right to catch the light and make sure everyone could see it clearly. But at home, the ring lived in her jewelry drawer most of the time, only coming out when it was convenient for her image. After the second cancellation, I started tracking our finances much more rigorously than I had been before. What I discovered was absolutely infuriating. Luna had opened 3 different store credit cards using our shared address and had maxed out every single one of them. She had been intercepting the bills so I wouldn't see them. And when I finally confronted her about it, she insisted that these purchases were all pre-wedding necessities and accused me of being controlling and financially abusive for questioning her spending habits. I also discovered that she had been systematically borrowing money from our wedding fund for various so-called emergencies. The most egregious example was a last-minute weekend trip to Cancun with her yoga friends that she hadn't bothered to tell me about until she was literally sitting at the airport, texting me from the departure gate. When I asked how she had paid for this spontaneous vacation, she casually mentioned that she had borrowed $1,500 from our wedding account and would pay it back soon. I was completely done being the sucker who was bankrolling her Instagram lifestyle while she kept moving the commitment goalposts further and further away. It was time for a serious change in strategy, and I was already formulating a plan in my head. Fast forward to June 2023, and wedding attempt number 3 was officially scheduled for early July at a beachside resort about 2 hours away from the city. We had opted for a smaller guest list this time, but it was still going to be a $30,000 affair when everything was said and done. I had insisted on purchasing wedding insurance this time around. Fool me twice and all that. A few weeks before Luna's inevitable third cancellation, I started noticing some odd patterns in her behavior that immediately raised red flags. Her advanced yoga teacher training sessions that supposedly happened on Thursday evenings and Saturday mornings never seemed to result in any new techniques, poses, or knowledge that she could demonstrate or discuss. She had also become increasingly protective of her phone, angling the screen away from me whenever she was texting and taking mysterious calls in the bathroom with the door locked. Our sex life had become noticeably less frequent, and when we did have sex, Luna seemed distracted and distant, like her mind was somewhere else entirely. Then I received an unexpected text message from Chloe, one of Luna's friends from her hot yoga certification course. We had met maybe 3 times at group gatherings, so it was unusual for her to contact me directly. "Marcus, can we meet up? It's important, and I think it should be just the 2 of us," her message read. We arranged to meet at the Starbucks near my office building the next day. Chloe looked nervous as hell when she arrived, constantly checking the door like Luna might burst in at any moment, wielding a yoga mat as some kind of weapon. "I don't know how to say this, but Luna's been seeing someone else," Chloe said without any preamble, clearly wanting to get this conversation over with as quickly as possible. "A guy named Blake from Gold's Gym downtown. It's been going on for at least 4 months that I know of." My stomach immediately dropped, but some part of me wasn't even surprised by this revelation. "How do you know this?" I asked. "She thinks I'm covering for her when she tells you she's at advanced teacher training on Thursday nights," Chloe explained, fidgeting with her coffee cup. "She's actually with him during those times. I've seen them together twice at that wine bar on 5th Street, and they were definitely not discussing yoga poses." She paused for a moment, looking even more uncomfortable. "I wouldn't normally get involved in something like this, but you seem like a decent guy who deserves to know the truth. And I found out something else that makes this whole situation even worse." "What's that?" I asked, though I wasn't sure I wanted to hear the answer. "He's married," she said quietly. 2 kids. His wife thinks he's working late when he's actually with Luna. I thanked Chloe for having the courage to tell me the truth, assured her that I would handle the situation appropriately, and then went back to my office. I closed the door, sat down at my desk, and just stared at my computer screen for a solid hour, trying to process what I had just learned. I'm not particularly proud of what I did next, but I had already funded 3 almost weddings and 5 years of Luna's half-assed career attempts, so I felt justified in doing some detective work of my own. 3 years earlier, I had helped Luna set up a Gmail account for her future wellness coaching business that never materialized beyond a logo she paid someone $400 to design. On a hunch, I decided to try logging into that account using her standard password, her cat's name Milo plus her birth year. Bingo, I was in. After some careful digging through her account, I found exactly what I was looking for. There were hundreds of text messages that had been automatically backed up from her phone, including extensive conversations with Blake that made it crystal clear what had been happening behind my back. "Can't wait to see you tomorrow. Elle will think I'm at a client meeting," one message read, followed by a laughing emoji. "Miss your body already. Thursday can't come fast enough," read another from Blake. There were selfies of them together at hotel bars, explicit messages that made me physically sick to read, and hotel receipts for what Luna had labeled as afternoon yoga workshops. They had been planning meetups specifically when I was away on business trips to Chicago and Boston, following the most basic affair playbook with absolutely no creativity whatsoever. The most infuriating part was that Luna had actually saved their entire texting history to her Google Drive account, including explicit photos that I definitely didn't need to see. This woman, who could barely remember to charge her phone, had somehow meticulously created a digital scrapbook of her affair. If you're going to cheat on someone, at least have the technical competence to cover your tracks properly. I methodically downloaded everything, making sure to maintain all the metadata and timestamps, and created a neat digital folder of evidence that I backed up to my secure cloud storage account. Then I started doing some research on Blake himself. LinkedIn showed Blake Thompson, personal trainer at Gold's Gym downtown, former supplement sales rep with an associate's degree in exercise science from the local community college. His Facebook profile revealed that Blake Thompson was married to Victoria Thompson, an elementary school teacher, and they had 2 kids aged 6 and 4. They lived in a nice suburban development about 30 minutes from the city, and their entire life was documented on social media. Family vacations to Disney World, backyard barbecues, school plays, the whole suburban family dream. I managed to find Victoria's email address through the school's parent-teacher contact directory. It was surprisingly easy to locate. Blake's social media presence was absolutely laughable when you knew what was really going on. This guy was posting wholesome family man content with his wife and kids every weekend, sharing motivational fitness garbage during the weekdays, and secretly messaging my fiancée about how he was planning to leave his family for her. Honestly, Blake and Luna deserved each other, but his wife and innocent children certainly didn't deserve to become collateral damage in their selfish affair. Here's the thing about Luna that most people completely missed. She was deeply predictable in her behavior patterns. She operated according to the same cycles and used the same excuses and manipulative tactics over and over again. She had the same pattern of initial enthusiasm followed by gradual abandonment with everything from jobs to hobbies to relationships. I knew with absolute certainty that she was going to cancel wedding number 3. All the signs were already there, exactly like they had been before the previous 2 cancellations. She was suddenly questioning the venue choice we had already confirmed, bringing up minor disagreements from years ago that had never been issues before, and picking fights about the honeymoon destination we had already booked and paid for. The Blake affair just provided concrete confirmation of what I had already suspected was happening. That Friday, I confirmed plans with my buddies Ryan and Diego for a 2-week trip to Costa Rica. We had been talking about taking a guy's trip for ages, and I had found incredibly cheap flights through Ryan's cousin, who worked for one of the major airlines. Ryan had family connections in San Jose. His grandparents had a beach house they rarely used anymore, and his cousins knew every non-touristy spot worth visiting in the entire country. I quietly transferred another $10,000 to what I had started calling my escape fund account, and made sure my passport was current and easily accessible. The escape fund hadn't originally started as an escape fund, to be honest. After the first canceled wedding, I had opened a separate account at a different bank as a precautionary measure, initially just as a small emergency fund in case Luna's increasingly reckless spending habits ever put our primary accounts at serious risk. After the second cancellation, it had evolved into a more deliberate backup plan. I had been making monthly transfers to this account, labeling them as investment portfolio contributions that Luna never questioned because financial matters bored her to tears. Over the course of 3 years, this account had grown to nearly $40,000. It wasn't enough money to retire on, but it was certainly enough to disappear for a while if the situation ever called for it. I had also started quietly moving my important documents to a small fireproof safe that I kept at my office. Passport, birth certificate, car title, investment account records. Not because I was actively planning to leave at that point, but because I had noticed Luna's tendency to misplace important things whenever she was upset with me about something. That Saturday, Luna suggested we go to Antonio's for dinner, the same upscale Italian restaurant where I had originally proposed to her. The symmetry of this choice wasn't lost on me, and I already knew exactly what conversation was coming. The restaurant was packed as usual, but we managed to get our regular table by the window. Luna ordered her usual fettuccine Alfredo, and then spent most of the meal pushing the pasta around her plate instead of actually eating it. Finally, she looked up at me with those practiced puppy dog eyes that had worked on me so many times before. "Marcus, sweetie, I've been thinking a lot about the wedding," she began, using that soft, vulnerable voice that was supposed to make me more sympathetic to whatever was coming next. "I just think I need more time to get everything sorted out. It's not that I don't want to marry you, but I'm just not sure I'm in the right headspace right now." It was the standard Luna script, word for word exactly what I had been expecting to hear. I had to fight back the urge to laugh out loud. With my yoga business potentially expanding into new areas, and all the stress of wedding planning on top of that, maybe we should postpone everything until things settle down a bit more, she continued with her rehearsed speech. I took another bite of my chicken parmesan and smiled calmly at her. "Okay, Luna, take all the time you need." The relief that washed over her face was almost comical to watch. She immediately launched into her backup rehearsed speech about working on herself and making sure we were really ready for such a big commitment, and how this was really the most mature decision for both of us. I just nodded along and made appropriate supportive noises. What Luna didn't realize was that I had already packed a suitcase that was hidden in my car trunk. The Costa Rica tickets were purchased and confirmed. My financial accounts had been separated and secured. My workplace knew I would be working remotely for an indefinite period. I was completely ready to execute my exit strategy. Luna spent the entire drive home from the restaurant texting someone on her phone, presumably Blake, with a small, satisfied smile playing at her lips. She clearly thought she had managed the situation perfectly, keeping her backup plan, me, on the hook while she continued pursuing her upgrade option, Blake. 3 years of experience with me had taught her that I was basically a pushover who would just accept whatever decision she made and wait patiently for her to figure out what she wanted. Sunday morning, I was up at 5 a.m., moving quietly through our apartment while Luna was still dead to the world after taking an Ambien the night before. I had already packed my essential belongings and staged everything over the previous week. Passport, laptop, external hard drives, and all my important documents were ready to go. The note I left for Luna was deliberately brief, written on the custom stationery she had ordered months earlier for our wedding thank you cards that would never be sent. "Luna, you said you need more time. You've got it, forever. I'm done, the wedding's off for good, and so are we. I'll get the rest of my stuff later. Marcus." I left the note on her pillow, took my keys off the shared hook by the front door, and walked out of our apartment for the last time. Fortunately, the lease was in my name and was ending in just 2 months anyway. Before I walked out the door completely, I remembered one last important detail. I opened Luna's jewelry drawer and retrieved the 1.5-carat engagement ring, the one that had cost me 3 months' salary, the one she loved taking selfies with but conveniently left in her drawer more often than she actually wore it. I wasn't about to leave a $12,000 ring behind for her to pawn for yet another yoga certification, or whatever new career pivot she would inevitably attempt next. My first stop was the bank, where I transferred most of my main checking account balance to the escape fund, leaving just enough money to cover the remaining 2 months of rent and utilities. Then I drove to Ryan's house, where he helped me load my pre-packed essential belongings into his garage for storage. "Holy shit, you're actually doing it," Ryan said, looking genuinely impressed as we organized my boxes like a game of Tetris. "I can't believe you're really going through with this." "I should have done this years ago," I replied, checking my watch. Our flight to Costa Rica was scheduled to depart at 2 p.m., and I still had a few more stops to make. Next, I drove to my parents' house to let them know what was happening. My dad had been telling me to dump Luna ever since the first wedding cancellation. He was a retired financial advisor who had seen this exact scenario play out with countless clients over the years. "She's using you as a financial safety net while she explores other options, son," he had told me last Christmas. "It's a classic hedging strategy that never ends well for the person being used." My mom tried to be diplomatically supportive, but she couldn't hide her obvious relief when I told her that Luna and I were finished for good. "Oh, honey, I'm sorry this happened to you," she said, giving me a tight hug. "But I'm also not sorry at all. That girl was never right for you and we could all see it." My final stop before heading to the airport was composing a detailed email to Victoria Thompson, Blake's wife, with all the screenshots and evidence I had collected of Luna and Blake's affair. I attached the hotel receipts, the explicit text messages, and the photos of them together at various locations around the city. After I hit send, I methodically blocked Luna on everything: phone, email, all social media platforms. I also blocked Sophia, Luna's parents Patricia and Robert, and their entire extended social circle. As a final administrative detail, I sent a text to my landlord explaining that I wouldn't be renewing our lease when it expired in September, but that I would continue paying rent until the lease officially ended. He was a decent guy who had always been reasonable with us, and I didn't want to leave him hanging. Then I walked out the door of my old life without looking back even once. San Jose, Costa Rica hit me like a warm, humid embrace when our flight landed in the early evening. By nightfall, Ryan, Diego, and I were sitting on the patio of Ryan's grandparents' beach house, drinking rum and listening to the waves crash on the shore just a few hundred yards away. The beach house wasn't particularly fancy or luxurious, but it had an absolutely killer location in Manuel Antonio, just a short walk from some of the most beautiful beaches in Central America. Ryan's grandfather had given Ryan a key years ago with simple instructions. Use it whenever you want, just don't burn the place down. Diego, who had been to Costa Rica several times before, had already mapped out our entire first week. We had deep-sea fishing planned with one of Ryan's cousins, who owned a boat, ATV tours through the mountain trails, and a day trip to Monteverde to experience the famous cloud forest. Ryan had taken charge of food and nightlife, and he knew how to cook authentic Costa Rican dishes that put most restaurants to shame. For the first time in years, I felt the physical tension completely drain from my shoulders. There was no Luna drama to navigate, no wedding planning spreadsheets to manage, no walking on eggshells around her perpetual career crises. Just sun, sand, cold drinks, and genuine friends who actually had my back no matter what. 5 days into our Costa Rica adventure, I was relaxing on the beach in a comfortable chair when Ryan wandered over with his phone in hand, scrolling through a series of messages with an amused expression on his face. "Dude," he said, barely containing his laughter, "Luna is having a complete and total meltdown back home." I leaned back in my chair, taking a sip of my beer. "Tell me everything." According to Ryan's sources, Luna had woken up late on Sunday morning, found my note, and initially assumed I was just throwing some kind of childish tantrum. She figured I had gone to a hotel to sulk for a day or two, and would come crawling back once I had calmed down and gotten over my hurt feelings. When she couldn't reach me after 24 hours of trying, she started systematically harassing all of our mutual friends, demanding to know where I was and insisting that they convince me to come home immediately. Then the nuclear bomb exploded in her face. Blake's wife, Victoria, had confronted him with all the evidence I had sent her, and according to Ryan's girlfriend, who had heard the story from Sophia's roommate, there had been an absolutely spectacular showdown at Blake and Victoria's suburban home. Blake had immediately thrown Luna completely under the bus when confronted by his wife, claiming that Luna had been obsessively pursuing him for months, that she had been the aggressor in their relationship, and that he had actually been trying to break things off with her for weeks. Victoria had kicked him out of the house anyway, and Blake had then blocked Luna on every possible platform. When Luna showed up at Gold's gym where Blake worked, desperately trying to confront him about abandoning her, he had security escort her out of the building like she was some kind of stalker. Luna's entire fairy tale fantasy had come crashing down in less than 48 hours. No fiancé, no boyfriend, no backup plan whatsoever. Ryan showed me Luna's increasingly desperate text messages to him, and they were absolutely hilarious to read. "Where is Marcus? This isn't funny anymore." Followed by, "Tell him to answer his phone right now," and then, "We need to talk immediately." But my personal favorite was, "He took my engagement ring. That's mine. And he stole my ring." Ryan, Diego, and I were laughing so hard, we nearly fell off our deck chairs. The sheer entitlement was absolutely mind-blowing. She genuinely couldn't comprehend that her actions might have consequences, and she was convinced that I was somehow the villain in this entire situation. Chloe had been keeping me updated through Ryan since I didn't want any direct contact with anyone from that toxic world. Luna had apparently been banking on me taking her back once again, while simultaneously keeping Blake as her side piece until he left his wife for her. When both options evaporated at exactly the same time, she went into complete emotional freefall. She had shown up at Blake's gym multiple times, screaming about how he had promised to leave his wife for her and start a new life together. According to Chloe's reports, security had to escort her out of the building on more than one occasion. Then, she went to my office building and tried to convince my administrative assistant that I was having some kind of mental breakdown and desperately needed Luna's help and support. My boss had actually texted me about this incident. "Your ex showed up here today. I told her you're on extended leave for personal reasons. She seems pretty unstable. Is everything okay on your end?" I thanked him for handling the situation professionally and asked building security not to let her into the office if she returned. I ended up blocking Chloe's number too after thanking her through Ryan for keeping me informed. I wanted a completely clean break with no loose ends or connections to my old life. Here's what Ryan didn't tell me until several weeks later, because he thought it might upset me while I was trying to enjoy my vacation. Luna had attempted to access my laptop back at the apartment, but fortunately, it was password protected. She had tried to transfer money from our old joint checking account, but I had already emptied it except for the rent money. She had even tried to cancel my credit cards by calling the companies and claiming they had been stolen. But when the credit card company called me to verify this obvious lie, I promptly removed her as an authorized user on all my accounts. She had also shown up at my parents' house twice, once at midnight like some kind of deranged stalker, and my dad had simply closed the door in her face without saying a word. The second time, she had brought her mother Patricia as backup reinforcement, thinking that parental pressure might work in her favor. My mom had actually invited them both in for coffee, listened patiently to their demands to know my exact whereabouts, and then calmly replied, "Marcus is a grown man who clearly doesn't want any contact with you. I suggest you respect that decision." Then she had politely but firmly shown them both out of the house. What started as a planned 2-week guy's trip to Costa Rica ended up turning into a full month. I managed to extend my stay, found a co-working space in San Jose with reliable Wi-Fi, and convinced my boss to let me work remotely for an indefinite period. My productivity was actually higher than it had been in years, since I no longer had Luna's constant drama and manufactured crises interrupting my workflow. I eventually moved from Ryan's grandparents' beach house to a small furnished apartment I rented in Tamarindo, a laid-back surf town on the Pacific coast. I learned how to surf properly, developed a decent tan for the first time in my adult life, and started running on the beach every single morning. I was sleeping better than I had in years, without the constant stress and anxiety that had become my normal state of being. According to Ryan's regular updates, the Luna situation had continued to evolve in predictably dramatic fashion. She had been crashing at Sophia's tiny one-bedroom apartment since I hadn't renewed our lease, and the two sisters were at each other's throats within just a few days of this arrangement. Luna had expected unlimited sympathy and emotional support from Sophia, while Sophia had expected some gratitude and financial contribution toward rent and utilities. The situation came to a head when Sophia caught Luna trying to use her credit card to buy a plane ticket to Costa Rica. According to Ryan's girlfriend, they had such a loud screaming match about this attempted theft that the neighbors actually called the police. Luna's mother, Patricia, had started her own campaign to guilt me into coming back, calling my parents multiple times with increasingly desperate pleas. "She's struggling financially without Marcus," Patricia had told my mom during one of these calls. "She can't afford rent on her own. Marcus has responsibilities here that he can't just abandon." My mom, who is usually the diplomatic one in every situation, had finally reached her breaking point. "Luna is 28 years old, Patricia," she had replied firmly. "Maybe it's time she learned to support herself instead of relying on my son or on you and your husband. The lease is paid through September, so after that her housing situation becomes her own problem to solve." Patricia had apparently hung up on my mom after that particular conversation. The absolute crowning absurdity came when Luna actually consulted some strip mall lawyer who sent a completely laughable legal letter to my parents' house, the only address she had for me. This joke of a legal document demanded emotional distress compensation, half the value of my car, and something they called spousal support, despite the obvious fact that we had never actually been married. I forwarded this ridiculous letter to my cousin Olivia, who happens to be a sharp corporate attorney in New York. Olivia sent back a response that basically translated to "fuck around and find out." Her letter outlined my detailed documentation of the 3 canceled weddings, complete with dates and financial losses, Luna's spotty work history, and the concrete evidence of her infidelity that I had collected. Olivia reminded Luna's cut-rate lawyer that unmarried partners have absolutely no financial obligations to each other beyond shared property that's in both names, which we had none of. She also made it crystal clear that any further harassment would result in a restraining order being filed immediately. We never heard another word from that lawyer again. Luna's final desperate move was launching a social media smear campaign, posting vague but obviously pointed accusations about betrayal and emotional abandonment, and how some men just can't handle strong, independent women. A few acquaintances who had only heard her carefully edited version of events reached out to me with concerned messages like, "Dude, are you okay?" I heard what happened with Luna. I sent these people a detailed timeline of the 3 canceled weddings along with some carefully selected screenshots of the affair evidence. After that, it was complete radio silence from everyone who had initially bought into Luna's victim narrative. Through Ryan's girlfriend, I heard that Luna's yoga studio had finally let her go after she had a complete emotional breakdown during one of her classes. She had apparently burst into tears while attempting to demonstrate a basic downward dog pose, completely disrupting the entire session. She had been showing up late to her classes looking increasingly disheveled and unkempt, and spending more time talking to her students about her traumatic breakup than actually teaching any yoga techniques. Her Instagram following had dropped by about 30% after several rambling live sessions where she alternated between viciously trashing me and desperately trying to justify her own actions to anyone who would listen. The few people who were still following her content were mostly there for the train wreck entertainment value at this point. The real kicker was that Blake's wife Victoria had publicly outed both Luna and Blake in a community Facebook group that many of Luna's potential yoga clients belonged to. Victoria had been surgically precise in her approach, just the facts with time-stamped evidence and screenshots. But the fallout in the local wellness community had been immediate and devastating. Luna could no longer credibly market herself as a spiritual wellness guide and relationship coach when everyone in the yoga community knew she had been sleeping with a married father of 2. Blake wasn't doing much better in this whole situation. Gold's Gym had asked him to resign after multiple clients complained about his unprofessional behavior and the drama that seemed to follow him around. Victoria had filed for divorce with an excellent attorney who was being funded by her parents, and Blake's side business selling fitness supplements had completely tanked after his adultery became public knowledge in their suburban community. After 2 months in Costa Rica, Ryan flew down again for a long weekend visit. Through his local cousins, we got connected with a group of expats and locals. 3 guys who ran a popular surf shop and dive center, and 2 women who worked as tour guides for the luxury eco-resorts in the area. They showed us the real Costa Rica that most tourists never get to experience. Hidden waterfalls that weren't on any maps, unmarked beaches with perfect waves, and family-run restaurants serving the most incredible food I had ever tasted in my life. Isabella was one of the tour guides in this group. She was incredibly smart with a biology degree from the University of Costa Rica, spoke perfect English with just a slight accent that made every word sound more interesting, and had the kind of natural beauty that didn't require filters, makeup, or any artificial enhancement. We hit it off immediately and naturally. She taught me how to surf properly, moving beyond the basic techniques I'd picked up on my own. I helped her upgrade her business website and set up some digital marketing strategies to attract more high-end clients. The biggest difference between Isabella and Luna became crystal clear the very first time we went out to dinner together. When the check arrived, Isabella immediately reached for her wallet without any hesitation or expectation that I would automatically cover everything. I insisted on paying since I had been the one to suggest the restaurant, but her automatic assumption that she would pay her own way was refreshingly different from what I'd grown accustomed to. "I can pay for my own dinner," she said with a genuine smile. "Besides, I was the one who asked you out, remember?" She had a valid point. She had been the one to call it an official date first. About 3 months into my Costa Rica adventure, Ryan posted a casual group photo on Instagram. It wasn't anything special, just all of us hanging out at a beachside bar after a particularly good day of surfing. Isabella was sitting next to me, leaning in close, and both of us were sun-kissed and laughing about something someone had just said. I hadn't even thought about the social media implications. My own accounts had been basically dormant since I left Luna behind. Within an hour of Ryan posting that photo, my phone started absolutely blowing up with calls from unknown numbers. I ignored most of them until one persistent caller left a voicemail that I decided to listen to. "Marcus, it's me!" Luna's voice said, and I could hear the barely controlled hysteria underneath her attempt to sound calm. "Who the fuck is that girl in Ryan's picture? We need to talk right now. This isn't funny anymore. Call me back immediately." Luna had obviously been stalking Ryan's social media accounts obsessively and had spotted me in the background of his photo. She had apparently resorted to borrowing phones from friends, co-workers, and even complete strangers at various yoga studios around the city to try to get through the blocks I had put in place. I finally answered one of these calls out of sheer irritation and curiosity about how delusional she had become. "What do you want, Luna? Who's that girl in the picture? Are you cheating on me?" she demanded immediately. The level of delusion was absolutely staggering. "Luna, I left you 3 months ago," I said slowly, as if I were talking to a small child. "I took back the engagement ring you didn't deserve. I'm not coming back. There is no us anymore. I'm hanging up now." "No, Marcus, you can't do this to us," she said, her voice getting higher and more desperate. "I made one mistake, but we can work through this." "Those weren't mistakes, Luna. They were deliberate choices," I replied firmly. "Choices have consequences. Enjoy dealing with yours." I hung up and immediately blocked that number as well. When she tried calling from other borrowed numbers over the next few days, I simply didn't pick up. Eventually, she either gave up or ran out of people willing to lend her their phones for her harassment campaign. According to Ryan, Luna had gone completely nuclear after seeing that photo of me with Isabella. She had created a fake Instagram account specifically to message Isabella directly, sending her a rambling manifesto about how I was emotionally damaged and unstable, and how I would inevitably abandon Isabella just like I had supposedly abandoned her. Isabella had read the first few lines of this unhinged message, immediately recognized the obvious signs of mental instability, and blocked the fake account without reading the rest. "Your ex seems really nice," Isabella said to me dryly when she told me about the incident later. "She's definitely consistent in her approach, I'll give her that." The most pathetic part of this entire situation was that Luna had started posting throwback photos of us from years ago, captioning them with completely revisionist history about our beautiful relationship and how she was patiently waiting for me to come to my senses and return to her. She had conveniently edited out all the parts about canceling 3 separate weddings and sleeping with a married personal trainer for months. One aspect of leaving Luna that I hadn't fully anticipated was the immediate and dramatic financial upside. Without her constant drain on my resources, my savings rate had literally tripled overnight. There were no more $200 yoga workshops that never led to any actual income or career advancement. No more investment pieces that were really just designer clothes she would wear once for Instagram photos. No more subsidizing her half of the rent when she was between opportunities, which had been most months during our relationship. The funny thing was that now that I was officially single, I was actually spending significantly less money but enjoying my life far more than I had in years. My beachfront apartment in Tamarindo cost exactly half of what we had been paying for our place back in the city. The local food was both cheaper and infinitely better than the trendy restaurants Luna had insisted on visiting every week. And Isabella, despite my repeated offers to treat her to expensive dinners and activities, insisted on paying her own way most of the time. 6 months later, I'm back in the United States now, but not in the same city where all the Luna drama had unfolded. I found an incredible job opportunity in Atlanta with a 30% salary increase, significantly better benefits, and a hybrid work policy that gives me much more flexibility. I'm closer to the mountains now, which I love, and I have a downtown loft apartment with absolutely no memories or baggage attached to it. More importantly, I'm dating Isabella seriously now. She had been looking to expand her eco-tourism business into the United States market anyway, and Georgia's outdoor adventure scene turned out to be the perfect fit for her expertise and business model. Isabella is everything that Luna wasn't. She's genuinely independent, supportive without being needy, completely honest about everything, and financially responsible in ways that still amaze me. She doesn't expect me to bankroll her entire lifestyle or solve all of her problems for her. She doesn't create unnecessary drama just to test my loyalty or see how much I'm willing to tolerate. The relationship actually feels like a true partnership between equals, not a hostage situation where my wallet is being held for ransom while I try to prove my devotion. Ryan visited Atlanta last month, and we spent a long weekend hiking one of the 14,000-foot peaks in North Georgia, drinking local craft beers, and catching up on everything that had happened since Costa Rica. It was during this visit that Ryan finally told me something he had been holding back for months. "Blake's wife, Victoria, went through with the divorce," he said, as we sat on my balcony overlooking the Atlanta skyline. "Turns out Luna wasn't even Blake's first affair. The guy had a whole pattern of cheating with different clients at the gym." He took a sip of his beer and continued, "And Luna? She's working at Lululemon now, still living with Sophia in that tiny apartment, and still telling anyone who will listen that you're the villain who cruelly abandoned her in her time of need." I just laughed when I heard this update. It was exactly what I had expected to happen. Ryan also filled me in on the complete financial devastation that Blake had experienced. Victoria's divorce attorney had been absolutely ruthless, successfully arguing that Blake's pattern of infidelity and unprofessional behavior with gym clients constituted grounds for an extremely uneven division of their marital assets. Blake had lost the house, half of his retirement accounts, and was now paying substantial child support payments. The guy's entire life had imploded as a direct result of his own choices. According to Ryan's sources, Blake and Luna had actually tried to make a real relationship work for about 3 weeks after both of their primary relationships had exploded. But it lasted exactly as long as you'd expect, when two selfish people suddenly have to deal with each other's actual problems instead of just having exciting secret meetups. They were at each other's throats almost immediately. Shocking, I know. Last weekend, Isabella and I flew back to my hometown so I could introduce her to my parents. I hadn't been back since moving to Atlanta, and I wanted my family to meet the woman who had become such an important part of my life. My mom and dad instantly loved Isabella, especially my dad, who was particularly impressed with her business acumen and complete financial self-sufficiency. We were having coffee in my parents' living room on Sunday morning, just relaxing and enjoying each other's company, when the doorbell started ringing repeatedly in that aggressive way that immediately puts everyone on edge. I opened the front door to find Luna standing on the porch, and she looked like she had been living rough for a while. Her hair roots were showing badly. Her eyes had that manic gleam that comes from too much stress and too little sleep, and she had clearly lost weight in an unhealthy way that made her look gaunt rather than fit. "Marcus," she said, trying to use that breathy, seductive voice that used to work on me years ago. "I heard through the grapevine that you were in town. We really need to talk about everything that's happened." I stayed firmly planted in the doorway, blocking her entry into my parents' house. "There's absolutely nothing for us to talk about, Luna." "Please, I've really changed," she said, attempting to look vulnerable and reformed. "I've been going to therapy regularly, and I understand what I did wrong now. I know I hurt you, but people make mistakes." She tried to look past me into the house, clearly hoping to push her way inside. "Can I just come in for 5 minutes? After everything we've been through together, surely you can give me just 5 minutes to explain. Whatever you think you have to say, you can say it right here on the porch," I replied firmly. She immediately switched to her wounded victim act, complete with tears starting to glisten in her eyes. "After everything we shared together, after 7 years of building a life, you won't even give me 5 minutes of your time? We've been through 3 canceled weddings and your affair with a married man," I said calmly. "That pretty much covers our entire relationship history. Marcus, please, I know I made some mistakes, but we had something special," she started to say, but then Isabella appeared behind me, casually resting her hand on my back in a gesture of quiet support. "Babe, is everything okay out here?" Isabella asked with genuine concern. Luna's face completely contorted as she connected the dots and realized who Isabella was. "You're the slut from that beach picture," she snarled, her mask of vulnerability immediately dropping. I felt Isabella tense slightly beside me, but she just smiled calmly and replied, "I'm Isabella, and you must be the ex who apparently can't count to 3 when it comes to wedding dates." Luna looked like someone had physically slapped her across the face. Then the emotional dam completely broke, and her true personality came flooding out. "Are you kidding me?" she screamed. "You bring your Costa Rican whore to your parents' house? After everything I did for you? After everything I sacrificed? I waited for you. I loved you. And you're here with this tourism trash?" I stepped partially outside, keeping my voice low but absolutely firm. "That's enough, Luna. You need to leave this property right now." "I'm not going anywhere until you give me a proper explanation," she said, her voice getting shriller. "You owe me at least that much after everything we've been through." "I don't owe you anything," I said clearly. "You cheated with a married guy for months. You stole money from your own sister to try to follow me to Costa Rica. You had your mother calling my parents because you couldn't pay your own rent. At what point in that pathetic story did I become the person who owes you something?" Luna's face turned bright red with rage. "You're just mad because I needed time to figure things out. Not everyone has their entire life perfectly planned out like you do. Some of us are still finding ourselves and growing as people." I couldn't help but laugh at the absurdity. "Luna, you're 28 years old. You think you're so much better than me with your fancy job and your exotic girlfriend," she spat venomously. Isabella stepped forward calmly. I run my own successful business, have a biology degree, and speak 3 languages fluently. What exactly have you accomplished besides getting yourself escorted out of Gold's gym by security? Luna actually lunged forward like she was going to physically attack Isabella, but I quickly stepped between them. That's it. You have exactly 10 seconds to get off this property before I call the police. Luna's eyes darted frantically between Isabella and me, searching desperately for any leverage or weakness she could exploit. Finding absolutely none, she backed up toward the street. "This isn't over," she said, with as much venom as she could muster. "She'll get bored with you just like I did, and when she does, don't come crawling back to me." Luna turned and stomped back to her car, a new-looking Audi that her parents had undoubtedly financed for her, and peeled away from the curb with unnecessary drama. As we walked back inside to rejoin my parents, who had tactfully stayed in the living room during the entire confrontation, Isabella slipped her hand into mine. "So that's the famous Luna," she said with amusement. "That's her in all her glory," I confirmed. "She seems really stable and well-adjusted," Isabella said sarcastically. We both burst out laughing as we sat back down with my parents. My dad simply raised his coffee mug in a silent toast and said, "You definitely dodged a bullet there, son. I actually sat down and did the complete financial math recently, just out of curiosity about the total cost of my 7-year relationship with Luna. Over those 7 years, I spent nearly $127,000 on canceled wedding deposits, Luna's various business ventures that went absolutely nowhere, covering her share of rent and bills when she was perpetually between opportunities, and countless other expenses that I had justified as investments in our shared future. That figure doesn't even include the regular relationship costs, like dinners out, gifts, vacations, and all the other normal expenses that come with dating someone for 7 years. When I think about what I could have done with that money, additional real estate investments, maxing out retirement contributions even further, or simply having it sitting in investment accounts growing, it's almost staggering. But here's the thing I've learned. Some people desperately need to learn that actions have real consequences, and that needing more time sometimes actually means no more chances. The best revenge truly isn't plotting some elaborate scheme to destroy someone's life. The best revenge is simply living well and moving forward without them. Looking back on the entire situation now, I can see how Luna operated with a very specific strategy, whether she was conscious of it or not. She wanted to maintain the social status and Instagram-worthy lifestyle that came with being engaged to someone financially stable, while keeping her options open to upgrade to someone she found more exciting or attractive. The engagement ring was the perfect symbol of this approach, prominently displayed whenever it served her image, but conveniently stored away when she didn't want to feel the weight of actual commitment. She wanted the benefits of a committed relationship without any of the responsibilities or sacrifices that real commitment requires. What she never understood, and what ultimately destroyed her entire strategy, was that you can't indefinitely string someone along while pursuing other options. Eventually, even the most patient person reaches their breaking point. Eventually, the ATM gets tired of being used and walks away. The difference between Luna and Isabella couldn't be more stark. Isabella approaches our relationship as a true partnership between equals. She doesn't expect me to solve her problems or fund her lifestyle. She brings her own ambition, her own financial stability, and her own emotional maturity to the table. When we make decisions together, they're actually joint decisions based on mutual respect and shared goals. With Luna, I was always walking on eggshells, trying to anticipate her next crisis or manufactured emergency. With Isabella, I can just be myself and focus on building something meaningful together. It's the difference between a relationship that drains your energy and one that actually adds value to your life. I have no regrets about the way I handled my exit from that toxic situation. I could have confronted Luna directly about the affair, had dramatic screaming matches, or tried to work things out through couples therapy. Instead, I gathered my evidence, made my plan, and executed it cleanly. Some people might say I was cold or calculated about the whole thing, but I prefer to think of it as finally learning to respect myself enough to walk away from a situation that was never going to improve. Luna had shown me exactly who she was through her actions. 3 canceled weddings, financial irresponsibility, and an affair with a married man. I finally decided to believe her. The aftermath proved that my assessment was completely accurate. When faced with real consequences for her choices, Luna didn't accept responsibility, learn from her mistakes, or work to improve herself. Instead, she lashed out, played the victim, and tried to manipulate everyone around her into fixing her problems for her. Even now, according to Ryan's latest updates, she's still telling her version of the story where I'm the villain who abandoned her. She's still working retail at Lululemon, still living with her sister, and still waiting for someone else to solve her problems. Some people never learn, and that's not my responsibility to fix. Meanwhile, Isabella and I are planning our first real vacation together. A trip to New Zealand where she wants to explore potential business partnerships with adventure tourism companies there. We're talking about buying a house together in Atlanta, possibly getting a dog, and building the kind of stable adult relationship that I never had with Luna. The best part is that these conversations don't feel forced or manipulative. We're not setting artificial timelines or creating elaborate tests for each other. We're just two adults who enjoy each other's company and want to build something meaningful together. If there's any lesson to be learned from my experience, it's this. Pay attention to patterns of behavior, not promises or excuses. When someone shows you who they are through their actions, believe them the first time. And never, ever let anyone convince you that you're asking for too much when you expect basic respect and honesty in a relationship. Life is too short to waste years of your life trying to change someone who doesn't want to change. Sometimes the best thing you can do for yourself is to simply walk away and let them face the consequences of their choices alone. Luna got exactly what she deserved, nothing. And I got exactly what I deserved, a fresh start with someone who actually values what I bring to the table. Some stories don't have dramatic endings with grand gestures or poetic justice. Sometimes the best ending is just moving on and living better without the person who was holding you back. And honestly, that's more than enough for me.